Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Junkyard Dawgcast. I'm your host, Jordan Hill. We got the whole crew with us on this Tuesday afternoon, Kip Adams and Benjamin Wolk. And fellas, believe it or not, we're getting closer and closer to the middle point of fall camp, halfway point. And probably more importantly, we're closing in on college football being here, period. It's pretty hard to believe. Kip, how is this Tuesday treating you as the countdown continues? And as far as the Georgia Bulldogs are concerned, we get closer and closer to September 2nd.
Yeah, the polls are out. It's right around the corner. We're getting emails about college football pick'em. It's that's when it's here. It's time to get serious, and it's really where I started to get conflicted because go Braves. There's nothing that feels better than beating up on some New York teams. Like they're the Savannah Bananas out there. No offense to those guys. They do, play the best brand of baseball out there, but this is it. Preseason NFL football, college football right around the corner. Obviously that's, the big focus here, but we made it through. And honestly, it just really feels like there wasn't really a lot of time that we didn't have something going on. So it just feels like one of the better years as far as just getting through the off season as quickly and painlessly as possible.
Going through the off season and adding a new buddy with us in Ben Wolk, who's getting ready for this season. High school football, I know it's been getting ready to go full force. How is this Tuesday treating you, Ben?
Well, it's good. Am I missing emails again? I hear something about emails from a pick'em. I feel like I'm left off every important email list that there needs to be. What do I need to know about a pick'em?
Yeah, we don't want the people finish second. If you ain't first, you're last. So unfortunately, Ben, you did not make the cut for the college football pick.
Okay, understood. But yes, it does feel like football season's here. I know I've said that probably each of the last 5 podcasts that we've done, but scrimmages last week, high school scrimmages, that is, got actual high school football games that I'm going to be going to this week. I think, 18 days maybe until kickoff for the Georgia UT Martin game. Obviously, we got week 0 coming up here in 10 days pretty much. So, man, it's really here. It's really here.
Quite a bit to talk about as we continue the countdown to the start of the season. And I need to throw to you guys something that totally slipped my mind before we started recording. But Georgia is number 1 once again. I don't know that was much of a surprise, but Georgia, number 1 team in the AP poll, also in the USA Today coaches poll. Kip, any thoughts on how that shook out with Georgia being number 1 and just how you anticipate this team will handle such lofty expectations as they get ready to try to go back to back to back?
What a completely different, just narrative and viewpoint of this Georgia program since, the last time Georgia was number 1 in the preseason. I think you go back and I was covering the team then, and every single season Georgia was known as the underachievers. A lot of talent, could never get it done. And I think about Mike Bobo, being in the second season as the offensive coordinator back then. And, he knows better than anyone, just, not just what that pressure's like, but just, again, having to, live up to those expectations. And now he's seen what it looks like when a program actually does live up to those expectations. And so it's, we've kind of come full circle here. But now, Georgia's, Kirby would hate it if we brought it up, but they're chasing history, something we haven't seen done before since what? We talk about Minnesota, and that's still, a national championship that's going to be argued. So I think this is truly special just to watch. And this is just still one of the better teams on paper that we've seen at Georgia. So I think it's going to be an exciting and entertaining season for the Dogs. And I think, right now they just have to continue to do what Kirby Smart says and avoid complacency.
I'm of the mindset I wouldn't be surprised if we hear Kirby on the mic saying, "Don't look like the number 1 team to me." He's going to eat that up. Ben, what do you think about them coming out, being number 1 in both those polls and just the expectations this team is working with?
I think Kirby Smart personally bullied everybody into making that happen. I think that after the offseason jokes were around Nolan Smith's 5-7 comments and how could Kirby Smart brainwash his team into truly believing that nobody believed in them. But the reality is that is a rewritten history of how last offseason went. Sure, Georgia was ranked highly going into last season. Nobody was going into last season saying, we firmly believe that Georgia is going to win back-to-back national championships. That was not the narrative. They were not picked to win the conference. I think that I, myself included, viewed Alabama and Ohio State as the two teams that were going to be at the top of college football, and that Georgia would be in a good position to rebound from losing 15 guys to the draft by having, a good season, getting back to Atlanta, giving Alabama a fight. I think that's how people viewed Georgia's 2022 campaign, and they ended up being the 15-0 national champions, dominating everybody, dominating them so much that people were able to rewrite the history of how they actually talked about Georgia going into that season. But all of that to say, I think that this year, people that were in power of making those decisions of, voting on these polls, we're not going to let that happen again. They weren't going to let the two-time defending national champions not be the number one overall team. Whether they feel like there are road bumps that they could run into on the schedule or not, I don't think was going to matter. I think it really came down to nobody was going to let Georgia not be the number one overall team again coming into the season, given what all the narratives were coming out of last season, and Kirby Smart, so-called, being able to brainwash Georgia players into thinking that they weren't seen as the best, because they truly weren't going into last year.
Something that has been worth following throughout the month of August has been Georgia going through fall camp. We went through their first scrimmage on Saturday, had a chance to talk to Kirby Smart after the fact. Some pretty interesting nuggets, and I'll kind of roll through. I was the only one of us three that were there for Kirby talking about it. Wrote stories, some notes from what we learned about that first scrimmage. I think the biggest thing for me would be Raylan Wilson. It seems like they avoided what could have been a catastrophic injury just for the true freshman. They did not think that he had ligament damage when he hyperextended his knee. From what I heard, that kind of seemed like the oh crap moment of the scrimmage. He had to limp off. A guy that's really talented, former 5-star, that they are in good position at inside linebacker, but you want a guy like that available. With some of the stuff Kirby said, I thought it was really interesting. He made sure to kind of, I wouldn't necessarily say call out freshman defensive lineman Jordan Hall, but he mentioned him by name and like, look, we need him to step up. We need him to contribute. Kind of had a rough day at the scrimmage. And that's sort of part of, especially that first scrimmage of fall camp. You anticipate those freshmen, especially those big guys, to really be feeling the heat. And I think a lot of the people that were there had to deal with that. Defense being ahead of the offense in that first scrimmage, I don't think that was necessarily a shock, especially when you consider a new starting quarterback and you consider some of the talent that's coming back on defense. Sound like the defensive line performed really, really well, and I think that's got to make you feel good if you're a Georgia fan. When it comes to guys like Nazir Stackhouse, Zion Logue, Warren Brinson, some of those experienced guys, that has to make you feel good knowing that Jalen Carter's gone. They need some of those guys to step up. Seemed like the receivers had trouble with drops. Kind of have to clean that up, get ready, especially by the time you get to that second scrimmage on Saturday, and need those guys to step up. And I thought it was pretty interesting that Makai Muse seemed to get some attention. We've seen him out and about with those receivers when we've been out at practice. Walk on, not the biggest guy in the world, but very shifty. And I think he's a guy that probably not going to start, but I think we'll see him quite a bit this season, and I think it's due to how hard he's worked and what he's been able to do to this point. I'll start with you, Ben. Was there anything that you heard or saw from Saturday that really caught your attention, or even just things you want to keep an eye on going forward based on what we heard from that first scrimmage?
Well, going back to what you said, I think that one of the takeaways was definitely the defense seemed to be ahead of the offense. And, we catch whispers throughout the course of fall camp. And the reason why I think that was probably welcome news to Kirby Smart and the coaching staff in general is I had been hearing a bit of the opposite throughout early in the camp, that the offensive line really was getting the better of the defensive line throughout much of the early stages of the fall camp. We've heard, it's not a surprise to hear that the offensive line is viewed as one of the better units on the team, because they've got, for guys that are 3 returning starters, 4 guys that are coming back that are very regular contributors. And I think the guys behind them have, Georgia would feel really good about trotting those guys out as well. Really, Georgia's second unit on the offensive line, I think, would be viewed as one of the best, in the country, really. But I think hearing that the defensive line finally got the edge when it came down to scrimmage, I know that the juices get flowing a little bit more once that scrimmage comes around. I think that showed you some of the gamerness, I guess you could say, that the defensive line has in their room. So I think that was one of my big takeaways. I'm excited to see how they rotate. I know we've talked a lot about Jordan Hill offline, online a little bit as well, but I'm excited to see how the freshman can maybe work his way into the rotation, but not just him, other guys like Christian Miller, that haven't, we heard a lot of them through their recruiting processes. That happens a lot. You come in as a freshman, you don't play right away at Georgia because it's hard to crack the rotation. But then you start to maybe hear rumblings that they're having good outings, that they're starting to put some practices together. And so I think that Georgia has a lot of defensive linemen that fit into that. We've seen, time and time again, the development that Georgia can have on the defensive line. So I would say that's probably my takeaway. And then it sounds crazy. I would have been laughing at myself if I had been hearing this at the beginning of camp, but Cash Jones and Makai Muse are 2 names that I just keep hearing over and over and over again. We've heard people say it on the record in press conferences. When you're hearing those camp whispers, we hear about those 2 names a lot. And, there's sometimes that I start to wonder, are these smoke screens because Georgia's got like studs in the receiver room that they don't want people to know about, or Andrew Paul's just having an unbelievable camp and you're wanting people to be thinking more about Cash Jones than Andrew Paul? Like, these are the things that I wonder, but you start to hear those 2 names enough. I think that there's really no way that they don't get involved in some capacity on the team this fall, which is wild.
Yeah, I think you hit on it. And it really blows my mind the way that Georgia maximizes its walk-ons. I mean, these are not guys that they're just like, well, you're going to be a tackling dummy for 3 or 4 years. These guys get involved. And, this is still the team where Stetson Bennett, came out of nowhere as a walk-on. And they definitely do an outstanding job evaluating the walk-ons. Kip, was there anything from Saturday scrimmage that caught your attention, or anything that you want to add on to what Ben and I sort of took away from what happened?
Kirby Smart always knows exactly what he's saying. I mean, he has a point and a plan with everything. And I think to your point about him talking about Makai Muse out there, I think it's absolutely also a motivational tool for those guys ahead of him. Compliment the guy that's out there showing out, to remind, the guys that are more heralded, Arian Smith, big year for him. Ra Thomas coming in with, a lot of accolades himself. And then, guys like Dylan Bell coming off a big season, expecting to make a bigger impact this year. Those guys have to continue to play to the standard. If Makai Muse is out there playing to the standard, and then maybe some of those other guys aren't in one practice, it's an easy way for Kirby to go ahead and light up a little bit of a fire under those guys going into the season. And, I like what you said about the defensive line. I think that, a lot of the talk this offseason was that this was this maybe kind of a no-name group, just a deep rotation, but maybe no stars. And I think you're starting to see Zion Logue maybe fight back against that a little bit and show that, he's ready to step up. We've seen Devontae Wyatt, Jordan Davis, obviously Jalen Carter. We've seen these guys make a big impact on that defensive front. That may be the main reason why Georgia's defense has played at the level it has the last couple of seasons. And now it's Zion's turn. He's waited in the wings, and I think that he's ready to show that he can do a little bit of everything. We know what he can do at 315 pounds, as far as stopping the run. But I think he's going to show that he could be consistent and play a lot of roles for them and make an impact. And so you look at that group, and we talked about this before, or we went on the air, but, a guy like Christian Miller coming on in camp, adding to that depth that they're going to have, and which is basically a very talented 3-man rotation. But I think if you got Christian Miller as the number 2 defensive tackle, Warren Brinson out there, but then knowing you have Nazir Stackhouse and Zion Logue able to rotate at both spots when one of them's at the nose tackle, and then Michael Williams obviously at defensive end with Trammell, you've got an outstanding group that can do a lot of different things for you as you continue to see who's going to be that impact edge rusher, or maybe different guys at that edge position are giving you different looks on second and third down and bringing different skill sets. You've got a group that can make it happen on the front. So I think that you got to be, real confident about that group heading into the season. Probably, as confident as any position group out there. And then to add to that, I think what we've seen so far from Jonel Aguero is really, really positive. And I think he's a guy that's really coming on strong. And, we kind of talked about, if Tyke Smith was going to be that starter at the star position, and they're giving Jonel every opportunity to not just earn a lot of snaps early on, but potentially start the season just like Malachi Starks did last year. I think so far, really positive returns from him. And again, that position group has a lot of star power. If you got another very talented freshman going in there with an experienced group, it could really be maybe the biggest impact group on the football team.
Yeah, a lot of positive buzz from Jonel to this point, and he's someone that is going to be worth watching going forward. Take a quick break, come back, talk a little bit more about what we want to see in the coming week of fall camp, and talk a little bit about another recruiting development for the Dogs. Welcome back, everybody. Well, going forward, getting ready for another week of fall camp for Georgia, another scrimmage on Saturday. Still plenty to watch, plenty to talk about. I'll start with you, Ben. What do you want to learn once we get to that second scrimmage from Georgia? Maybe things building off of that first scrimmage, or different areas of this team that catch your attention?
I mean, I think because the takeaway from the first scrimmage was that the offense wasn't firing on all cylinders, it might have taken them a little while to get into a groove offensively. I mean, I think hearing Carson Beck especially have a bounce back performance in that scrimmage, and really, I'm not saying that he has to be the star of the scrimmage on Saturday, but I think to feel confident in what Georgia has at the quarterback position going in that second scrimmage, once you've had the chance to get some of that game situation rust off in that first scrimmage, having Carson Beck be a really top performer in that scrimmage on Saturday, I think is going to be really important. So hearing how the quarterbacks in general just perform will probably be critical. I know that most of the reach outs that I got after Kirby Smart's press conference on Saturday had to do with Georgia fans worried about the fact that Kirby was saying he wasn't thrilled with the quarterback play, as if Kirby Smart was going to step up after the first scrimmage and say how thrilled he was with the quarterback play. But I do think that, there might be fans wanting a shifting narrative a little bit, that things are trending in the right direction at the quarterback position. So I know that's the basic answer. That, that's what the kind of stuff that Kip would do, taking a quarterback 1-1 in the draft. But I got to go with quarterback. I think that that's an important thing that people want to hear about coming up this weekend.
We'll get more into Kip's pick there in a few minutes. But, just building off of what you just mentioned, Ben, I felt like some people, kind of had their eyebrows raised with how Kirby talked about that first scrimmage and being like, we're not where we need to be. I expected nothing different. I mean, because that's how it always is. He's always looking for something more. He's going to push these guys. And I know there are areas they want to improve, but I was not at all shocked by what he had to say. As far as what I want to hear going forward is probably just the receivers, because what I heard from that scrimmage was there's a lot of drops across the board. And what was told to me was, it wasn't like the guys you would count on like a Brock Bowers or a Ladd McConkey, but they just had too many drops. And Kirby kind of backed that up talking about the quarterback play and was like, well, you kind of have to keep things in mind. Like, let's say a quarterback threw an interception. Well, if he hit a guy in the hands and the guy dropped it and gets picked, that doesn't really go against the quarterback. Well, then Georgia puts out the highlight video and, well, Arian Smith, ball hits him in the hands and then drops off. And I believe Terrell Foster, a walk-on linebacker, intercepts it. I think you just need to see that group shored up, because I think really highly of these wide receivers and these tight ends, just how deep they are. But they're going to need, especially those younger guys, to show they can be counted on, because if they don't trust them, they're not going to play. And I think that's sort of what you want to see in that second scrimmage, is especially those younger guys take a step forward, show they can be counted on, and give an argument for the coaches that, hey, let's get these guys in the mix as well. Kip, what about you? What do you want to see or hear over this next week, including the scrimmage that's coming up on Saturday?
I want to hear that they've got some healthy running backs. Right now we just got done talking about Cash Jones and the role that he may be earning for himself. But at the same time, we already know that Branson Robinson's probably going to, miss some time to start the season. And we know that Kendall, Milton, again, hamstring issue. Does he get back in time to start this season? I'm not ready to count him out. A lot of fans have kind of just, already written him off as being injury prone. And, you hate to see things like that happen. But Georgia has been kind of they've had redemption arcs for its running backs coming off injuries. And if Georgia has the season we're all talking about as a preseason number one, then there's a chance they're going to play 15 games. And so, whether or not Kendall Milton's completely healthy to start the season, or, Dejon Edwards, obviously Branson Robinson, Andrew Paul coming off an ACL, who is going to be out there to start the season, is still something I'm interested in seeing. But with Kendall, it's more, he is going to play important football for Georgia this season. And for him to get out strong to start the season would probably be, real big news for him and his confidence as he tries to have the kind of year that he knows he can and we know he can have. And he's extremely talented. I know that, every time you see Branson Robinson out there, you think, this guy, looks like the next Nick Chubb, and he's obviously a workout warrior. But, Kendall Milton's very, very productive every time he touches the ball, and I think that he's set up still to have a big year. Don't count him out. I want to see what he looks like the rest of camp.
Before we turn the page from fall camp, I want to revisit our breakout draft and each of our teams. And I thought the most fair way to do this is for each of us to look at the team they drafted. And if either of you guys need me to run through it, I can do that.
I've got it pulled up here.
Okay, great. And we can talk about a guy that we really like that we drafted. And then if there's someone hanging out there that none of us got, you can pick that guy up. And we're going to go in reverse order because Ben had the third pick. I feel it's only fair. Ben gets to go first. SC Kip is not very thrilled if you are listening to this, not happy with the turn of events. But Ben, give me a guy you drafted that you feel pretty good about, and then a free agent maybe out there that you'd like to swap in.
Yeah, so it feels sort of cheap to go this route because he was my first pick, but I do think Dominic Lovett has a chance to be Georgia's best receiver this year, maybe the best receiver in the SEC. I think he really does have that skill level and talent level. But I'm not going to go with that easy answer. I'm going to go with Ernest Green because I'm going to go with the guy that I think is going to step up and be Georgia's left tackle. And I think not enough people maybe are talking about the fact that Georgia is just going to be replacing its left tackle and plugging a guy in there. And I think that a lot of people at Georgia feel really, really, really good about what they're going to be plugging in there at left tackle as well. So I'll go with Ernest Green just to not go with the simple answer. But I am going to actually exchange my last pick. I took CJ Allen with my last pick of the draft, and I would actually exchange that for Jordan Hall, a guy that we've talked about a bunch already. All of us had. I battled with who I wanted to take with that last pick of the draft anyway. And looking back at it, I took two linebackers. I took Jalen Walker. I took CJ Allen. I think that Jalen Walker will probably find his way into the rotation more just because of the different nature that he brings to that linebacker room compared to some of the other guys. He can really get after the passer, so he's going to be used in certain situations. And while I do think CJ Allen will carve out a role for himself, it's just a very busy room right now. There's a lot of really, really good guys, and I think the rotation that you're going to get at defensive line as a freshman with a guy like Jordan Hall just gives him a better chance to break out than a guy like CJ Allen.
I feel like Ben probably picked the best player available there, which I cannot blame him. So I had the second pick. I feel okay across the board with the five guys that I got. I'll go with Dylan Bell as my top guy because I really think that people have sort of slept on him and thought, well, they've got Marcus Jack Saint, they got Ra Thomas. I've heard some good things about Dylan. I think he's a guy that's going to play quite a bit. I still don't think he's going to start. I think when you have Marcus coming back, that veteran at the X position, but I think Dylan's going to play quite a bit, and I think he's done a good job of putting himself in a good situation. As far as guys who have not been drafted, I feel like you could go really one of two ways at running back, but I'm going to go with Andrew Paul. I think that he's a guy that is still, earning some confidence, trying to build some trust in that knee, which is understandable. But he got a lot of hype last fall camp before he got hurt. I think that he's a guy that has a really good opportunity ahead of him with the way the running back position is, with Kendall Milton banged up, with Branson Robinson working his way back. I really like Andrew Paul. I think he could be a guy that we see play significantly once we get into this season. Kip, let's throw it to you. Who is your favorite pick that you had in the draft, and who are you picking up from the free agency pool?
Well, I'll be honest. I love my entire team.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just this is a pretty solid roster. But if I'm going to go with a guy that, I feel is not just had a strong camp, but is also positioned to play a huge role for Georgia this season. I'm going to go with Dalen Everett. I think this cornerback competition has been, probably the most heated one in camp. 4 or 5 extremely talented guys out there competing. But I really think that Dalen Everett, as I said to begin, fall camp, kind of can do everything for Georgia. And I think he's a guy that Fran Brown and Will Muschamp and Kirby have a lot of confidence in. If they put him opposite of Kamari Lassiter, he's going to be able to, not just get the job done, but also make some plays. And his ability to, again, play the run, do well in coverage is going to help him a lot. And I think that overall all-around ability will get him CB1 when the season starts. So I really like where he's at. He's set up well. Georgia's kind of had a rotation of cornerbacks coming in and kind of having big years opposite of some superstar cornerbacks over the last 3 or 4 seasons. And I think Dalen could be next in line. Still has to compete out there and win that job, but I like where he is right now. And I like I said, I don't even know if I want to replace anyone right now. I think with Oscar Delp, coming in and being reportedly, close to 250 pounds now, 245 out there. If that's true, then it bodes well for him this season. But it's still, I'm not sure how much, 12 personnel Georgia is going to run this year. His role may be limited just because the best 11 on the field might be, the wide receiver group's kind of ridiculous right now, even though, we have yet to kind of actually see them out there performing like we think they can. But we do think that Mike Bobo is going to be using a lot of, maybe 3-4 wide receiver sets out there, including Bowers split out. So I'm not sure how big his role is going to be, but you know what? If I'm going to take someone, I would actually do a projection of a guy that I just think's having a big fall camp, and that's Dylan Fairchild. I think he's a guy that, again, if we're talking about someone who could potentially start, we know that if everyone's healthy, Oscar Delp's only going to be out there in certain formations. They have some other guy at tight end that's probably going to play a lot this year. So I think, again, Fairchild's a guy that may be the strongest player on the team, a guy that, we've heard about in the spring, obviously, when they're in the weight room, he's getting it done, but, has been behind some older, more experienced guys on this offensive line the last couple of years. This could be, his opportunity to kind of take that next step in his development right now in camp. And they're in the heat of it right now. This is going to probably be with 2-3 weeks left, could be the toughest stretch of the year as far as practice. And this is his opportunity right now to maybe push Xavier Truss at left guard. And I think that obviously Xavier Truss has played a lot of football for Georgia, but I don't think Stacey Searles is going to, shy away from putting his best 5 on the field. And I think Dylan has a chance to earn that spot if he can compete consistently in practice and show what he can do against, that deep defensive line that Georgia has. He could really push for a starting job, if not early, but maybe during the season. So I think he's just a guy that I think if I had an extra pick, if I'm, replacing Delp, it would definitely be with him.
Before we get out of here, let's talk about some recruiting news for Georgia earlier this week. Georgia went hard after five-star defensive lineman Williams Winery from Missouri. Ultimately, he decided to stay put. He is staying home and going to Missouri. Sounded like Georgia was the next school up behind, in front of Oklahoma, though he decided to go to Missouri. Ben, I'll start with you. You've written a little bit about his commitment. What did you make of Williams' decision and what Georgia could do next at defensive line?
Well, I mean, obviously a great in-state win for Missouri. I'll start there. Like anytime that you are a program like Missouri, and I don't mean that, I don't mean to diminish them by any means, but when you have Georgia in a recruitment who is churning out defensive linemen, year after year, and you've got Brent Venables at Oklahoma who has a track record of churning out defensive linemen, you just assume that the top guys in the country are going to gravitate to places like that when they're involved in their recruitment. In this case, he ended up at the in-state school at Missouri. I think it's a huge win. If anybody saw the video of Eli Drinkwitz celebrating this, go watch it, because he truly turned Eli Drinkwitz into a child, hugging other coaches with how excited he got about this commitment. So if that tells you anything you need to know about how good of a football player Missouri just got, there's certainly more than just football elements that played into this. And I think that NIL is an element of everything that we're going to do from a recruiting standpoint forever. So what I never want us to be doing here, where we're the ones that just default to, it was an NIL recruitment or whatever, because these are the types of things that we know are ongoing throughout the course of the recruitment. We know they're trending that way. And we also know that every school or their collectives are having to utilize this in some way, shape, or form to be successful. That's across the board, no matter what caliber of recruit that you are. But when you are, the number one defensive lineman in the country, like Williams was, then you're definitely going to have that be a factor. I've written about this a little bit as well, but Missouri has some progressive NIL laws in place that allow for guys that are committed to or have signed financial aid agreements with in-state schools. They are able to profit off of their name, image, and likeness in the state of Missouri. So starting August 28th, when this new legislation goes into effect in Missouri, Williams Winery will be able to profit off of his name, image, and likeness as a high school athlete that's committed to and will have signed his financial aid agreement to go to Missouri. So that there are advantages that are in place. And I think that the question that I've been getting, and I am now, I've asked some of these questions as well, and I hope to learn more about it because, admittedly, I don't know a ton about where it's going legislatively with Georgia and how that's going to happen. But these are the questions that we're getting. What is Georgia as a state? Is there a counter to that? I mean, we've seen Missouri, Arkansas, Louisiana, California. They have some laws like this that are giving them certain recruiting advantages. I think everybody feels a little bit sleazy and like they have to take a shower after they talk about the fact that we're getting the government involved with NIL and guys making money and all of that. But the reality is the only way that this is going to figure itself out and there's going to be any kind of consistency across the board is for these governments to be getting involved, because the NCAA is not going to step in and figure this out. Unfortunately, I think it's going to result in a lot of states having a lot of different rules for some time before we're able to get to some level of uniformity. But I'm interested to see, just from an NIL standpoint, whether Georgia, the state, the legislature gets involved with anything in the near future as well, because other places are certainly doing it. And that cutting edge nature is, as we're seeing with the best defensive lineman in the country, certainly playing a part.
Georgia and the state government have gotten involved with each other before. The FOIA laws, when Kirby was hired, that was kind of called the Kirby Smart Law when they made those changes. Kip, what did you think of Williams' decision? And if there's any names that stick out to you on the Georgia side that we should keep an eye on when it comes to defensive line? First
off, with Williams, I mean, we're in uncharted territory here. As Ben said, we have to learn about this. So with his NIL potentially being connected to a financial aid agreement, We don't know whether Georgia's going to, continue to recruit him and how connected he will be to being able to receive, NIL money before he graduates high school. We don't know how binding those documents are going to be. It's not something we would know immediately after the fact, but we're sure it's going to come out eventually. And I'm sure that Georgia already knows everything there is to know about that. And so we're going to continue to watch that and see what, November and December hold for, teams having, various, seasons. If Missouri goes, 4-8, does it change his mind about how he feels about Missouri? What is he able to do? We're going to be tracking that, and it's going to be interesting. It's a whole new world for us. And you know what? For me, that's refreshing because I've already done that song and dance of regular recruitments. I want to see some new kinds of drama and see how everything unfolds. That's why everybody follows recruiting. It's entertaining. But for Georgia right now, you got to go to LJ McCray. I think that's the guy that if you're a Georgia fan, you're looking to see what big time defensive lineman do we have the best chance with. Well, I think, the 6'6", 275-pound defensive lineman out of Daytona Beach at Mainland High School is that guy. I think he fits exactly what Georgia is looking for from a 5 technique. I really like where Georgia stands right now, but his recruitment's not over. I think that Florida is right there. They've done an outstanding job recruiting him. And it's going to be up to Georgia to get him back in town, during the season to continue their momentum. And like I said with Williams, if Florida struggles, then that can only help Georgia and their momentum. So it could be the difference maker in a recruitment that we think is probably going to continue to go throughout the season.
We're going to wrap up this episode right there. I appreciate Kip and Ben for popping on. Everybody, Dawgcast.com, a lot of content coming out of fall camp. We'll have a look at some of the newcomers, some of the transfers, what they've done to this point later Tuesday. We'll also have some interviews going forward, and we'll get the chance to talk to Kirby Smart after that second scrimmage on Saturday. So a very busy time, but a very fun time because college football is right around the corner. So for Kip Adams and Benjamin Wolk, I'm Jordan Hill. Appreciate everyone who checked this out live, who is listening to it after the fact. We are out of here, everybody. Until next time, take care.